Hello everyone and welcome to my new YouTube channel. My name is Maike, I'm coming from Germany and I'm currently developing my own indie game called Roots of Revival. On this channel I want to share some updates on the development progress and my gains and pain as an indie developer. My GameDev journey started at the beginning of 2023, when I had the idea to design a paperfold squirrel as a present for my friend's birthday. That was the first time that I came into contact with Blender and with 3D modeling. And as I had very much fun with Blender, I continued to learn 3D modeling even after the paperfold project. After experimenting about half of a year with Blender, I started to become curious how to make a game out of these 3D models. So soon after that I also started to learn how to make games in Unity. After learning some basics of Blender and Unity by myself, with online courses, YouTube tutorials and some projects from the Unity Learn platform, I finally decided to start my own project and to develop my own indie game. As I've got my own garden and gardening is a big hobby of mine, and at the same time I'm into ecological topics, I had the idea of making a game about both gardening and ecology. The main idea behind the game is about cultivating a garden in a polluted area in the near future and at the same time restore the ecological balance in the whole region. I started by developing a simple building system. I used Unity's Pro Builder tool to prepare some basic prototype prefabs represented by simple geometric shapes. By pressing the Tab key, I could switch the camera to the building mode. In the building mode, I had the option to click on one of the bottoms to choose what I wanted to build. I could choose between the simple garden bed, the raised garden bed and a path. After selecting one of the options, a semi-transparent preview of the chosen prefab was instantiated. Using raycasting, the position of the preview prefab followed the mouse cursor. I also implemented a rotation feature, allowing the prefab to be rotated in both directions using the Q and E keys. When the preview prefab hovered over an invalid area, it turned red to signal to the player that building was not possible at that position. Once the player found a valid spot, the object could be placed with a simple mouse click. For the path and the garden bed, I also implemented a snapping function, so newly placed objects will automatically align with existing ones. In case the player was not satisfied with the placement, I also implemented a way to destroy previously placed garden beds again. In the next step, I developed a first draft of an inventory system. I used simple geometric shapes to create prototypes of various items that the player can pick up. Learning how to create and use scriptable objects for the first time was a big milestone on my game journey. It allows me to simplify the process of creating new items in future development with just a few clicks. I implemented a basic outline that appears when the player targets an item. By pressing the E key, the player can pick up the item and add it to their inventory. The player can now inspect items within the inventory. I created an item slot that displays the quantity of the item it contains. By clicking on the slot, a panel on the right-hand side provides more detailed information about the item. Additionally, I implemented a drop feature, allowing the player to drop either all items in a slot or a partial quantity, which can later be picked up again. In the next step, I created the first solid material assets in Blender and learned how to import them into my Unity project. I also made some improvements to the user interface so the player receives more feedback on possible actions. The time management system now displays the in-game time and automatically progresses through days and seasons. Each day the weather changes randomly between sunny, rainy and stormy conditions. I also made initial improvements to the overall game environment by familiarizing myself with the Unity terrain editor. I added a ground texture and distributed grass across the terrain. Furthermore, I implemented a quick access bar at the bottom of the screen, where I can equip my first tools, a hoe, a watering can and a hammer, by pressing the tab key. In the next step, I implemented the planting system. The player can pick up vegetable seeds and use them from the inventory to plant vegetables in the garden beds with a drag and drop function. By watering the plants regularly each in-game day, the vegetables continue to grow. Once the vegetables are ripe, the player can harvest them and place them back into the inventory. Furthermore, I improved the building system. To build something or prepare a garden bed, the player now first needs to choose what they want to build from the building menu. Instead of building immediately, the menu now serves primarily as a tool to mark the location where the player wants to construct something. Back in the normal gameplay mode, the player must equip the appropriate tool before starting the building process. A progress bar now displays the building progress. Constructing something takes time and costs the player energy. Additionally, for certain constructions, the player must have the required materials in the inventory in order to proceed with the building process. So, this was the first year of the game development process. I mainly focused on programming and building the core mechanics, but spent very little time on graphics, on story, or creating an immersive game world. In the next steps, I will also start focusing more on these parts of the development process. I already have some ideas that I plan to work on in the coming months. I will be sharing updates on my progress on the schedule and showing new key features as soon as I implemented them. So if you have any feedback or suggestions, feel free to share them with me, and if you're interested in following the further development of the game, feel free to subscribe to my channel.